All right, so thanks to everyone for sticking around to the end here. And thanks for the opportunity to be here and speak a little bit. I'm Ryan Baumbach, and Shalinee Chikara is also here. We're both research faculty members here at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory. We're located in Tallahassee, Florida at the Florida State University. And what I want to talk about are some of the research opportunities that are available here. And hopefully by the end of this, give you a better idea of what our facility is all about, what it's like here, and maybe how we contrast with some of the other larger types of national labs that we've heard from today. So to start with, I just want to introduce Shalinee and I. We're both research faculty members. My history is that I did my PhD at the University of California, San Diego. I completed that in 2009, which feels like a long time ago now. I then was a postdoc in the same group. And after that, I went on to another postdoc position at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And Shalinee completed her PhD at the University of Kentucky, went on to a postdoc position at the Argonne National Laboratory at APS, and then finally to Los Alamos National Laboratory at the pulsed field facility that's located there. And I think that, you know, one or two thoughts about this. One, and I think we saw this with all the other speakers too, is that this is a pretty typical career track for, you know, going on into these types of jobs. And the second thing is that I think that Shalinee and I, you know, at this point, between the two of us, we've spanned both very large national labs and then what is a very small national lab here at the Mag Lab, and maybe everything in between. So I think we're in a position to sort of compare and contrast those types of things. All right, so what about the Mag Lab? What are we here for? What's our reason for existence? Well, the advertising slogan is that high magnetic fields lead to big discoveries in materials, energy, and life. And so the question is, you know, what does that really mean? Well, what it means, at least to me, is that these facilities are very multidisciplinary. And we have scientists here and users who visit here who cover disciplines that go, you know, all the way from physics, chemistry, geology, out to areas that I really, under other circumstances, probably wouldn't have any overlap with. And that would be things like medical science, medicine, biology, so on and so forth. And the Mag Lab is a really nice melting pot on at least a manageable scale, where you can see all of these things come together. Now, that being said, both Shalinee and I have expertise mainly in condensed matter physics, reaching out into chemistry and engineering. And so we're probably best qualified to talk on those topics. But if you are interested to get connected with people in other fields, she and I both know people all throughout the Mag Lab, and we can help make connections for you. Totally happy to do that. So please don't hesitate to ask if that sort of catches your interest. All right, so what about the Mag Lab? How do we exist? Well, as it turns out, we're actually one lab that's arrayed across 3 campuses or sites. The largest site is here in Tallahassee at Florida State University. We have 2 other sites at Los Alamos National Laboratory and another at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And each one of these sites serves a unique purpose or offers a unique set of capabilities. And so later on in this talk, I'm gonna tell at least a snapshot of what those different capabilities are and why we have these things. Also important, and I was thinking of this when I was hearing about the budgets of the other national labs, reminded of scale. I want to say that our funding, in contrast to Livermore, Los Alamos, Argonne, lots of other places which have funding from DOE or other sources, our funding is coming from the National Science Foundation, meaning that it's on sort of an order of magnitude or more smaller scale, okay? That's an important fact. But we are supported by the National Science Foundation and also the state of Florida. And then our site at Los Alamos additionally has some funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. Our funding does come under a single umbrella grant that's listed here, but I want to make the comment that most of the research faculty that work at the MAGLAB, at least here at the DC Field facility, also pursue individual PI grants, just like what happens at universities. So I myself have another NSF grant, other people have DOE, Army, Navy, so on and so forth. And what I really mean to say by this is that the MAGLAB is kind of a funny hybrid between a national lab and a university department in a way. So we're somehow straddling in between those two environments. A different way to put it, just so that I don't forget to say it later, and you'll see this when I show our facilities, but we're somehow a funny hybrid between an industrial site, like a power plant, and an academic department. So there's a lot of different convergences that happen here that you wouldn't really encounter in other places. All right, so what is our mission? All the national labs have to have a mission, so we have a mission too. And ours is to operate a world-leading high magnetic field user program. That's accompanied by the recognition that in order to have a really competitive program of that sort, we also need to have in-house scientists who are really on the cutting edge. So we also carry out in-house research that is in support of the user program, and individual PIs carry out different programs. Now, going along with this is that we want to maintain the facility and develop new instrumentation. And so I'll discuss this a little bit, but we are always putting a lot of effort into developing the next generation of high field magnets. And that's an exciting subset of work that happens. And then finally, because we are supported by the National Science Foundation, we have a really serious mission to conduct education and outreach activities. And this really spans a wide variety of things, but some examples are that we have a REU program, Research Experience for Undergraduates, RET, Research Experience for Teachers. We have mentorship programs for, well, of course, graduate students and postdocs, but also undergraduates, high schoolers, and even middle schoolers. I annually work with middle schoolers, and it's a lot of fun, although you have to keep them safe in the lab. And then, of course, there's the usual K through 12 outreach activities and these sorts of things. And one last thing, if you're ever in Tallahassee in February, we have an annual open house, which is really fantastic. It typically hosts about 10,000 people in a single day. So lots of educational activities that most people are involved in here at the lab. Okay, so what about our users? Well, this is what we like to call our Delta map. It illustrates where our users are coming from. They, first of all, come from all over the country, but also worldwide. And as you can see, roughly 3/4 of them are coming from a traditional academic environment, universities, and another 1/4 of them are coming from government labs or industry. And what I like to say about this is that you can see that all of these users are coming on a weekly basis from all over the world to do research here at the MAGLAB. What this does for researchers who are working here is that it creates a very dynamic environment where every week we have new folks coming in working on what are really, you know, the frontline topics in condensed matter physics or engineering or whatever. And so I feel that this gives exposure in a very rapid pace to a huge variety of topics. The result of this can be generation of ideas that wouldn't really happen otherwise, I would say. That's a common story here. Okay, so what about our staff? So besides our scientists and our postdocs and our graduate students, we have standing staff employing engineers, administrators, computer techs, writers, graphic designers, so on and so forth. This means that we have a nice institutional knowledge that's preserved over long periods of time. And our employees are coming from many, many different nationalities. So it's a pretty diverse environment in that way. And what about the users? Well, this is a breakdown from 2018 of who has been here. Roughly 50% are senior personnel, like professors or research faculty. And the other half are more or less postdocs and students. Looking at who is using what facility, and we see that the DC field facility is heavily used, closely followed by the pulsed field facility. I'll describe those in a bit more detail in just a minute. And then we see that something like 31% of our student users are female, 29% of the postdoc users are female. It's a very active effort here to promote diversity. That's something that our leadership is taking really seriously. What about topics? You know, what are people really working on? Well, in the DC field facility and the pulse field facility, this is dominated by condensed matter physics, with also engineering, magnets, chemistry, geochemistry, and biophysics. And then you can see on the right-hand side, there's these three other facilities, which are sort of dispersed across the three campuses, which are NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, AMRIS, which I always have to look up. Of course, I don't have it in front of me now. Here it is, Advanced Magnetic Resonance Imaging and Spectroscopy, and ICR, which is ion cyclotron resonance, which is much more devoted to chemistry and biophysics, right? So many topics being addressed. Now, here's the most important point, and I think this is something that everyone who's thinking about their career should file away, at least for future reference. Access to the MagLab is free, and the magnet time is granted based on proposals that are reviewed by the MagLab faculty. So the only thing you have to pay for is to get here and have a place to stay. Otherwise, this is a facility that can promote your research. Now, that being said, it is very competitive to get magnet time. And so a typical research group will have something like 1 to 2 weeks of magnet time each year. And this is generally enough to produce some very nice research in these different topic areas. Okay, so now what are the condensed matter science topics that people are looking at right now? Well, there's a long list, and I've compiled some of them here. I would imagine that some people in the audience are very familiar with these topics. I'll just call out two to say why high magnetic fields are useful. First of all, superconductivity. This is a topic that never goes away and is very important. I think people know that in the superconducting state, you have the formation of Cooper pairs. For a conventional superconductor, it may not take a very big field to break these Cooper pairs, but for most unconventional superconductors, which are really the ones that we want to be studying, it typically takes a very large magnetic field to break the Cooper pair, and hence the need for high magnetic fields. Another area that is very important right now, it feeds into issues like quantum computing, is the development of materials with topologically protected electronic states. These are interesting materials that have special electronic band structures. Without saying any more than that, I think it's clear that in order to understand these materials, you need to know the details of the shape of the Fermi surface. You have basically 1 or 2 ways to do this. One is angle resolved photoemission spectroscopy. The other is by tracking what is basically the cyclotron motion of electrons on the Fermi surface, which manifests as something called quantum oscillations. That's something you can typically only measure in large magnetic fields, and many of our users are focused on this sort of thing. So without taking a deep dive on either or any of these topics, this is sort of the general idea in condensed matter. Okay, so now what about the facilities themselves? Well, I'll start with our facility here in Tallahassee. This is our floor plan. Each of these bays that are shown here holds one of our magnet systems. And I won't read the whole list of them, but the point that I want to make is that we have a wide variety of different types of magnetic fields that are accessible. And in each of these systems, there's different environmental control situations that are available. In other words, different cryogenic refrigerators. And so these capabilities span all the way from sort of typical laboratory capabilities like quantum design 7 Tesla and 9 Tesla systems, all the way up to the real flagship system, which is the 45 Tesla hybrid magnet. Okay. The other thing I want to say about this is that at this facility, the idea is that we establish magnetic field environments that can be maintained over long periods of time. They're DC fields. This is achieved by building special solenoid magnets called bitter magnets. And then for most of these, running a persistent current through that magnet, right? And you know what happens when you run a big current through something, it wants to melt. So all of these magnets are accompanied by a huge physical plant that is basically devoted to keeping them cool with water. And this is where the combination of the industrial plant with science sort of come together. All right, in addition to that, we do have some superconducting magnets, but there's a very important limitation for superconducting magnets. And that is that at least the ones that are easily available are limited by their upper critical field, right, which is about 20 Tesla. So all of our superconducting magnets, which are listed here as SCM, have upper limits of about 18 Tesla. Okay, so that's the scope of magnet systems that are available here. Now, to give you a look inside of each of these systems, here's a typical cell that's set up for an experiment, cell 6, 41 Tesla system. Starting from the bottom of this third picture, you can see the magnet enclosure and the supports that go around it. Moving up, you can see the cryogenic refrigerator sticking out the top. And then finally, the electronics probe sticking out the top. And then on the far left-hand side, you can see the end of the electronics probe where a sample would be mounted. And your sample is a little teeny tiny grain of sand, right? That's how it typically works. Now, I don't know about you, but I've worked in this place for quite a long time. And looking at this still intimidates me. And the good news for everyone is that you don't have to know every last thing about how this works. Instead, we have research faculty who are extremely talented and extremely motivated to help you to make the experiment work. So your only job in coming to the Mag Lab is to come with an idea and a willingness to try and help to make it happen. The research faculty are excellent and they can always make it happen in this facility. All right, so one last statement about DC. I said that we are always developing new magnets. These are some recent examples which are coming online for users. The one that I really want to call out is in the middle. This is a 32 Tesla all superconducting magnet. The thing that makes this special is that instead of being made from a typical conventional superconductor, it's actually made from a high temperature superconductor, a cuprate superconductor. This is the first of its kind. So this is a big step forward for magnet science, and it's now becoming available for users. So really great opportunity. And this sort of thing is constantly in development here. Okay, finally, our facility at Gainesville is focused on producing a large magnetic field at exceedingly low temperatures. This facility has refrigerators that use something called adiabatic demagnetization to reach single millikelvin scale, right? And so the idea here is to look at the physics of matter at very low temperatures and under the influence of applied magnetic field. In addition, this facility is currently building up a capability to synthesize and process materials under extreme conditions, including high magnetic fields. More to come on that later. All right, so that takes me to the end of my time. I want to share with you how to get a hold of us. We have our website as well as our social media sources. To keep up with our latest discoveries, job opportunities, and events. And speaking of jobs, as I mentioned, the Mag Lab is a small site. The main way that people get involved and eventually possibly find a job here, I would say, is by starting as a postdoc. We do have many postdoc positions that come under the individual PI grants. But that's not to say that there aren't job opportunities. And if you want to find them or watch out for them, I would direct you to our job opportunities page, which is always being updated. But I think we have a much lower number of job opportunities than Livermore, for instance. So with that, I'll just say thank you for listening, and we'll be glad to take any